Welcome all to another edition of Talk Illini, brought to you by Orange and Blue News and the On3 Network. My name is Sonny Verma. That over there is my co-host Carson Bounds today. Look, Carson, it was a slow start for the Illini when it comes to this transfer portal. There was a lot of exits. We jokingly titled an episode the transfer portal taketh, and now we get the reverse, right? The transfer portal giveth. Today was just a chaotic, I won't even say day. It seems like from the late afternoon to evening, it just seemed every 45 minutes you refreshed, you got some Illini news. But again, that's what the next, essentially 10 days is going to look like until January 16th, I think the transfer portal closes.
Yep.
Before we get started, what are your thoughts on just the hectic of today?
Man, I woke up today, I had time to, I'm down in Florida with my family right now. I had time to, walk to the local coffee store, get a coffee. And then, as I will do, live tweeting all the big updates that happen. I got halfway home with my coffee and I just see, oh, shoot, I get like two names that are texted to me. It's like, oh, I need to do some due diligence here. Like these might be names that pop today. And then, I get home and, oh, Sabur Kareem is in the portal. And then immediately after, a couple hours after, you go, oh, someone else is in the portal, and oh, we got to commit. Like, it's just one thing after the other. It's a lot of action. It's good because you stay busy, but Illinois, both coming in and going out, they're wasting no time today.
Yeah, and you know what? By the way, Carson and I are doing this episode live, so if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section, and we'll get to them. Let's just go ahead and start with the good news. As Games Guru says, fantastic portal day, and Bailey staying has made Illini fans happy. Obviously, I think, in my opinion, the two best pieces of news today is Matthew Bailey and Jan Clark deciding that they're going to stay, make it one more round next year. I think this is fantastic news. I think having them is better news than any of the guys that we left. It was huge for the outlook of that team next year, which we know is going to be young. But to have Matthew, who I think could be a captain on the team coming back next year, and obviously Juice Clarke, who might be the most talented guy that we have in the secondary next year. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if either of them chose to enter the portal, they'd both be top 75 prospects, guys that'd be projected NFL talent. They'd be high 4 stars in the portal. And, sometimes your biggest wins are the guys that you keep, right? Matthew Bailey is, I kind of have a fun story coming up, seeing the team firsthand. The first time he had his first big surgery, he was out for a couple months. And, I go to the ARC every day to lift. I don't lift at the team facility because I'm not on the team. And at one point, shortly after his surgery, he probably wasn't allowed in Smith to lift. I saw him at the ARC getting a lift in by himself, early before he probably even should have, because, he's trying to get better, trying to get back on the field to compete with his teammates, right? He's the kind of guy, he leads both on field and off field. And, while we've seen a lot of injuries over the last couple of years that have kind of inhibited him, when he's healthy and when he's at his best, he's a guy that's, a true leader of the team and somebody that I think will be a high impact guy. If he has a full healthy season, I think he could be an NFL caliber guy. I have no doubt in that. I've seen it in practice over the years. And now that I'm not with the team anymore, I'm still confident in him. I believe that, even just talking to him in media scrubs, he's still very poised. He's developed as a communicator. I have no doubt, they have the helmet chips on offense and defense. They have one captain that yells out the commands, pre and post snap. That might be Matt Bailey next year. I would not be shocked. And as far as the other one goes, Juice Clarke, again, he's another guy, real competitor, a lot of tenacity. The secondary got a lot of flack this year for some deserving, some undeserving. Juice Clarke was not the problem in the secondary this year. He's probably the reason the secondary wasn't worse because, you look at the Ohio State game, Jeremiah Smith was held under 50 yards. How many people could say they did that this year? And that was Juice manned up on him one-on-one the entire time. So, those are two massive wins for the defense that, frankly, is going to have to retool at almost every other position. So it's huge that you can get those guys back for next year.
I think you're exactly right. When I think of the secondary on next year's team, I'm fascinated to watch it because Brett Bielema and next year's team is going to be kind of a reload. I'm not going to call it a rebuild, but we've got so much young talent. You're talking about Hankins, you're talking about Eberhardt, freshmen, true freshmen who I think are going to get some play next year. So you want to balance that out with some veterans back there as well, and having A 3-year starter like Matthew Bailey announced that he's returning. And let's be honest, him announcing on January 5th, that's early enough in the transfer portal cycle that can get other people who might be contemplating coming to Illinois, that could put them over the top, essentially, because some players may not want to play for a rebuilding team, or they may not want to be the star in the secondary, but to have other good players back there with you, hopefully this announcement was early enough that, it can help Brett in the long run. And we know Brett Bielema, and we know that stuff. Like, they know what they're doing when it comes to spacing these announcements out. I don't think it was by accident that Caton Hauser made his announcement yesterday, and then today you just had a whole flurry of people. I think Brett wanted Caton to have his moment, and now today was just again, like an influx of positivity and letting you know that this Illinois program is going all out, when it comes to this transfer portal. And now that we have that balance between the veterans in the backfield and the youth, and again, the youth, a lot of us are really excited about. It can reach ceilings that, we haven't had previously, which says a lot because we've had a lot of defensive backs drafted. But, overall, I think for those of you who are worried we're going to, win 3 games or 4 games next year, having those 2 cornerstones back in your secondary, I think should alleviate your worries a little bit at least.
Yeah, for sure. And Xavier Scott, that's the big name we're still waiting on. I think the expectation is he'll enter the draft for now, but we don't know. And getting back to critical pieces like this might make his decision a little more challenging.
Hi, Carson. So we got the people already in Illini uniforms coming back, but there was also an influx of new talent finally announcing that they were coming to Champaign this year. I think the first announcement was center Jake Renfro, a guy who's going to be entering his 7th season of college football. He's taken over 2,000 snaps. Obviously Brett Bielema has to rebuild this offensive line. We're losing 4 starters from last year's team. We can talk about Christian Martin a little bit later. Let's start with Jake just because he was first. What are your thoughts of Jake driving down south and coming to Champaign?
Yeah, man. I remember watching Jake my freshman year of college, playing snaps at Cincinnati as a rotational guy. And here I am as a second-year graduate student getting ready to talk about him playing next year for his 3rd team. But, that's some unnecessary shade. He's played over 1,000 career snaps, and he's been a pivotal part of multiple winning teams. He was on that Cincinnati team that went on that crazy run before the coach left for Wisconsin, and then he followed him to Wisconsin, right? And he's a guy, I'd say over the last 540 some odd snaps he's played, he's conceded, I think, 2 sacks. So even though he struggled with health over the last couple seasons, which is part of the reason he's coming back for 7th year, he's a high impact player. And even when he's not at his best, he's still, a top half of the Big Ten center, possibly top quarter. He was a preseason Remington watch list player. So, he's regarded as one of the best centers in college football. And the cherry on top is he's a graduate of Providence Catholic in Chicago. He's an in-state kid. And he's a guy Bielema's recruited multiple times, and he's a guy that Bielema's finally getting to come home.
Yeah, I think Jake sets the floor pretty high for that offensive line. Again, as you mentioned, the thing you have to worry about is his injury history. He missed all but 1 game in years 2022 and 23, and then he played and he missed all but 4 games in 2025. So it's like the injuries is something obviously you have to look into. I contacted my Wisconsin contacts, and quite honestly, they responded with a GIF of Mr. Glass, basically kind of insinuating that sometimes it's just frustrating whether he was going to play or not. Hopefully, Tank right and Brett can have him. Oh, it's just 1 more season, hopefully, and they can just get him right, because it's nice to have, again, I just talked about this in the secondary when it comes to the defensive backfield. You want a guy you can look at as a possible captain on your offensive line. That's going to be a brand new offensive line once more. Look, my Chicago Bears basically did the same thing. They brought in Joe Thuney, a guy who's been there, who's done that, and he's kind of the captain of that offensive line. Hopefully, Jake Renfro can play that role for this Illini offensive line next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's also get to shortly after Jake Renfro decided to commit. Christian Martin made his announcement that he was also coming to the Illini. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, huge thank you to Christian Martin for using On3 as his primary graphic source for this. Our guy JR had a nice assist there as well. Want to give him credit for that. But yeah, he told me today. I asked him how'd you visit, and he said, just first thing he said was, "I'm coming to Illinois. I'm shutting down my recruitment. My visit was amazing. The facility is filled with genuine guys who desire to get better. Nutrition, resources, player development, all through the roof. And he's excited to play in a Big Ten stage." For that to be the first thing that a player says to me is shocking. I mean, that's exciting. It tells you that the staff is doing something impressive when it comes to closing guys down on visits. He was scheduled to head up to Michigan State today for his second official visit. All sources indicate he did not make it up to East Lansing. So Illinois got the first visit, and they shut this thing down right away. And, on film, he's a guy 6'6", 300 pounds. Out of high school, the reason he ended up at Colorado State is he's about 265. So he's added about a good 40 pounds of playing weight since, as a redshirt sophomore now. He started this year. There's been some debates on PFF scores. I know we've seen that in the Illini Discord. His scores hovered around 55, 60 range for most of the year. That's always subjective, right? I see a guy who's long, got great length, carries weight well for a large tackle type build that he has. He moves well. It's got everything you need. It's just occasionally maybe stance is a little wide. Occasionally you might need to clean up a little footwork, but that's something he's got 2-3 years eligibility. That's something you can clean up with coaching. The errors in his game are like easily fixable with just repetition and good coaching.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. It's all about good coaching. He started all 12 games for Colorado State last year, which was a dumpster fire, let's just be honest. But Brett Bielema's done this before. Bart Miller has done this before with J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley, taking guys at a, respectfully a lower level and bringing them up into Big Ten competition and getting them ready for the next level, which I'm sure is one of the big sells that Brett had to Christian Martin. Hey, we got 2 years here in Champaign. We can develop you. We can get you into the NFL draft. Look, we've done it in years past. We just did it with J.C. Davis. Hopefully Melvin Priestley gets to make an appearance in the NFL, and you can be the next guy in line. It's nice to get, we know Renfro is in his last year. You get 2 years of Martin. So it's not like we have to keep cycling through new offensive linemen every single year. You have some young talent there, but now you can give them you can be patient with them. You can let them develop a little bit, knowing that you can have Martin. I don't know where they plan on placing him yet, or which part of the offensive line, but he looks like he could be a guy that Brett Bielema is intrigued with. Again, the fact that Christian was on campus, essentially right as the transfer portal opens, tells me that Brett wanted him. This is an eval that Brett and the staff has made, and they wanted him in orange and blue. And for the Illini fans who are paranoid that we're broke and we have no money, look, Michigan State has a lot of money. And the fact that, these guys are coming to Illinois at first, that tells you that we're in the ballpark. We're not being blown away by other offers. And, the fact that they sold Christian Martin to the point where he didn't even want to make that visit to East Lansing was huge.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, next up, who was after Christian Martin? I believe it was it Jay-Sean?
Yeah, Jan Platt. He was the last commit of the day today. This one admittedly caught me a little bit by surprise. He's a guy I've been kind of going back and forth with his agent a little bit, trying to get quotes on another recruit Illinois is going after. And Jay-Sean, I just saw he popped today. Didn't even know Illinois is recruiting him. I texted the agent shortly after. He's like, "Is this real?" And he's like, "Yeah, it is. It is." It's part of the game. Business is business. I respect it. But I turned on his film shortly before hopping on this podcast. Stats from last year: 46 catches, 720 yards, 6 combined touchdowns. I think one of them might have been a punt return or a kick return. But he's a guy coming out of FAU that he essentially was just a do-it-all guy in their slot. People online have kind of comped him to Hank Beatty. He reminds me a little bit more of Isaiah Williams stylistically, just in the sense I think he's a little more fluid of a mover. I think he's a little bit quicker. Hank is a little bit more precise of a route runner, but it's in that same archetype, right? They used Isaiah and Hank in very similar ways during their breakout seasons, and this is a guy that I think they will use in a similar manner.
Yeah, Platt's a guy that, look, if you bring in a quarterback like Caden Hauser, who's got an absolute rifle for an arm, you need a wide receiver who can just run really fast and go catch it. And I think Jay-Sean is simply one of those type of players. Now, Carson, I got to ask, because Illini fans are going to want to know, Obviously, Diaz is the other wide receiver who was rep by the same agent. Is Illinois out on Diaz now, who I think just wrapped up his Iowa visit and is going to be visiting? Is it Michigan State, I think, next? Is that correct?
Or no, headed to Kentucky.
Yeah, he's headed to Kentucky. Are they out on Diaz now? Is Platt the new guy, or are they still in on Diaz as well?
I asked the agent, and he said, as of an hour ago, I honestly have no idea. So I don't think they really know. Looking at their tape, they're similar players, but stylistically they each have different strengths to their game. I think Diaz is more the consistent route runner with very solid hands. I think Platt is one of the more burner types, but they both primarily have operated out of the slot for their offenses. So, could you take two slot guys? I think it's possible. Platt is also, I believe, a graduate transfer, whereas Diaz has 3 years of eligibility left. So taking one wouldn't necessarily rule the other one out, because they're going to be in college for different amounts of time. And even if they have they both in general operate out of the slot, they both, I think, could fill different needs for this team in year one.
Yeah, and Platt, I think, can fit multiple needs for this team. Like Diaz, I think, could, basically fight for a starting spot immediately. But Platt, now that you've lost Hank Beatty, you've lost your kick returner. And Platt can basically come right in and take up that spot. Look, next year's team may not, continue the 9+ wins every single year that we've had for the last 2 years. It's going to need every advantage that it can get. And special teams, I think, is simply one of those places where Brett needs to make sure he's shored up, make sure he turns that into a strength. You've already lost David Alano. I'm sure we're going to be looking for a kicker, or unless we have one in-house. But, getting your kick returner / punt returner in-house, and a guy who's shown that he can do it before, I think, again, when you talk about the wide receiver room, I think he's probably a rotational guy, maybe a depth guy, but it's nice to have what I think is basically your ace special teamers in-house now.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Carson, so we need to ask. So those are the 3 main guys that we got today. What are your impressions on basically the people that have left and the people that have come in so far?
Yeah, I think today we began to see a little more of the trickling out of guys that maybe necessarily were people that Illinois would have been happy to keep had they kept them. So, Sabor Kareem is one that comes to mind, where he was a rotational safety. And if he was happy remaining a rotational safety, Illinois may have been more than happy to let him stay around. But he's a guy, he probably will find a starting opportunity at another lower tier Power 4 school, or he could even be like a star at a G6 school, in my opinion. So, he chose to transfer out. That was one that was announced. Another one, Ethan Hampton. He's a guy, actually, JR asked me on the podcast the other day after we got Hauser. He says, do you think Hampton's going to stick around? And at the time I said, yeah, because I know he's a guy that's not afraid of competition, but you also have to factor he's a guy with limited eligibility left. And you can't fault a guy for wanting to go play. And it makes sense that he would leave in pursuit of going to play.
Yeah, for me, I was curious about Ethan in the sense where I don't necessarily know if he wanted to stay or not. But if I'm Brett Bielema, and you and I have both shared the same thoughts, we've heard the same thing from, I'm sure, similar people that are in the program. They really like Carson Boyd. And a part of them kind of wanted Carson to make the leap this year. And my line of thinking is, we know we have Hauser as the starting quarterback 1, presumably, at this point, but you still want to get Carson Boyd as much experience as possible. And how do you do that? You give him the backup snaps. Well, if Ethan Hampton's in home, then all of a sudden Ethan Hampton's taking snaps away from Carson. So I feel like now, basically this might be best for everyone involved. You have Caton. At this point, I think that solidifies him as a starter now that, Carson Boyd is the only kid there. But Carson also gets as many snaps as possible during these practices, during these offseason, the spring workouts and whatnot, as the number 2 guy, which can expedite his process to hopefully become starter next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, it kind of bridges through there, right? You go Boyd and then potentially Camden Lopati if Illinois can keep him committed.
Again, we are doing this live, so make sure you hit the like button on this particular video. We have another comment here from BZ1178. It says, who else on defense are we expecting back? I think at this point, it's probably easier. Is there anyone we're expecting that could leave?
One guy I heard as a potential option was Pat Farrell, but as of now, he's still here, and I don't think he's going to leave at this point. Again, I could always be proven wrong, but he's a guy. There was some rumors that some other schools were interested in him, possibly throwing out some other offers for him, and he didn't hop in the portal. So at least as of yet, and at this point, I don't think he's going to. But as far as defensive line, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was going to say I'm going position by position in my head here. Defensive line, I think that's maybe the one possibility. Guys in the secondary, Amar Reynolds is reported on the portal to be in the portal via On3 and 247, but we've yet to see an official announcement from him. So TBD if he's actually in the portal. That's one guy I'm watching because he's supposedly there. We just haven't heard anything. And, I'm not going to make the official report until it's confirmed from the kid himself.
Yeah, I think the main guy that we all have to keep our eyes on, is, as you mentioned, is X. It's Xavier Scott. If all of a sudden next year we can confirm that we have Xavier Scott, Juice Clarke, and Matthew Bailey, all three of them returning, I think that just raises the expectations of what next year's defense could look like, a great deal, especially with all the influx of young talent coming in. You have the blend of the young and the experience back there. But otherwise, I mean, you never know, right? Like, I had no idea Tamala Durjai was going to enter the transfer portal. This is the chaos. There's no more 2 transfer portals. Everything is done during these 14, 16 days. So it's a hard question to answer because there's going to be new information every 10 minutes, essentially. So it is what it is. But again, we're going to have all the up-to-date information for you right here. Oh, we have a new question. Let's get to this. Road Trip Adventure says, who redshirted this past season but may play a role in the rotation next year? Which rotation? Or are there any guys that you can think of, Carson?
I mean, off the top of my head, the answer is Braden Trimble. He's a guy, Illinois fans, even some coaches that I've talked to were surprised he wasn't playing at the end of this year. So moving forward, he's a guy, even with the people to bring in, if Braden Trimble doesn't earn some sort of impact role in the receiver room this coming season, I would be shocked.
Yeah, Trimble was one of those guys because he didn't play. I was very nervous, and I've been holding my breath if other schools would be in his ears trying to offer him a lot of money and saying, "Hey, we'll give you an opportunity." But as you said, he's not in the portal. Knock on wood, find the nearest piece of wood next to you. But regardless, whether Braden Trimble or anyone else joins the portal, again, make sure you're locked in right here on Orange and Blue News on Talk Illini, brought to you by the On3 Network. That's Carson Bounds. My name is Sonny. Again, brand new channel. So if you're an Illini fan, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And we'll see you probably tomorrow. There's going to be news tomorrow. Take care, ILL.